The Dralethian observation vessel Molten Claw hung in the void, like a silent predator, its angular hull bathed in the dull orange glow of its plasma reactors. Commander Dralethian flexed his segmented fingers against the command console, the dark metal surface warm beneath his touch. His third eyelids flicked sideways in irritation as the ship's scanners painted the human outpost below, a crude, blocky structure of gray permacrete, barely shielded against cosmic radiation. This is what the High Command fears. Beside him, scientist Vashdor adjusted the holographic feed, his copper-plated cranial ridges twitching with scholarly disdain. Their defensive measures are laughable. He pulsed through the neural link, the subvocalized words vibrating in Dralethian's auditory receptors. No energy shielding, no plasma-forged alloys, just stone and primitive alloys. Dralethian exhaled through his ventral vents, the heat shimmering in the recycled air. The High Command had sent them to assess humanity's military potential before formal first contact. The reports from the scout drones had been conflicting. The humans waged war with chemical explosives and kinetic slugs, their tactics chaotic, their discipline questionable. Yet somehow, they had clawed their way from their gravity well and claimed 3-star systems in less than a century. There must be a miscalculation. The hologram zoomed in on the human compound. Figures moved, small, soft-bodied creatures in drab uniforms. No exoskeletal plating, no thermal, dampening scales, just flesh, so easily punctured, so easily burned. Observe their training exercises, Vashdor suggested, mandibles clicking in amusement. Dralethian complied. The humans were conducting a live fire drill. Their weapons were archaic, projectile-based, reliant on chemical propellants. Yet their movements were precise, their formations tight despite the lack of neural synchronization. One human, designated as Major Caroline Dex by the translation matrix, barked orders, her voice carrying even through the filtered feed. Then the simulation began. Explosions rocked the compound. Smoke billowed. The humans scattered, not in panic, but in practiced maneuvers. Dralethian's dorsal spines stiffened as he watched them regroup, dragging wounded comrades into cover. One soldier, Sergeant Daniel Carter, took a simulated hit to the leg. He fell, and then he laughed. A guttural, vibrating sound completely at odds with the pain, signals his body emitted. He dragged himself forward, still firing, still fighting, even as the simulation tagged him as combat. Ineffective, Vashdor's neural pulse carried disbelief. This is illogical. Their physiological readings indicate severe stress responses, yet they continue to engage. Their pain thresholds are wrong. Dralethian interrupted. Because the data was wrong, the humans weren't ignoring pain. They were using it. Their adrenal responses spiked. Their neural activity flared, and instead of shutting down, their combat efficiency increased. Dralethian's claws flexed. Galactic military doctrine was clear. A soldier's effectiveness dropped when injured. Pain was a failsafe, a biological imperative to retreat, to survive. The humans treated it as a challenge. The simulation ended. The humans stood, breathing hard, some bleeding from training injuries. Major Dex clapped Carter on the shoulder. No reprimand, no condemnation for his recklessness. Vashdor's neural pulse was uneasy. Commander, their psychological resilience violates all known parameters. If they can endure this level of damage in training, then what will they endure in war? Dralethian finished. The Molten Claw's reactors hummed, their orange glow pulsing like a slow, ominous heartbeat. First contact protocols dictated caution, but as Dralethian watched the humans patch their wounds and prepare for another drill, he wondered if the High Command had any idea what they were about to invite into the galaxy. The observation deck of the Molten Claw hummed with the low, resonant thrum of its plasma reactors, their orange, red glow casting long, jagged shadows across the reinforced alloy walls. Dralethian stood motionless, his armored plates absorbing the ambient heat as he studied the human vessel drifting in the void beyond. It was an unassuming thing by Dralethian standards. No segmented armor plating, no visible weapon ports, no molten energy conduits, pulsing with industrial might. Just smooth, matte, black plating and a silhouette that curved where theirs angled, organic where theirs was brutally efficient. A silent colossus, Vashdor's talons clicked against the datas, slate as he scrolled through the latest scans. Their structural integrity is unconventional, he murmured, mandibles twitching in unease. No external shielding, no ablative plating, just layers of composite alloys and something else. Something our sensors can't fully resolve. Dralethian's primary eyes narrowed. A weakness? Vashdor hesitated. Or a design philosophy we don't yet understand. The humans had named their ship Perseverance, a sentimental choice, one that would have been mocked in the Dralethian fleet, where warships bore titles like Sundering Maw or Ember of Annihilation. Yet, as Dralethian watched, the vessel's engines flared, not with the controlled rhythmic pulses of Dralethian drives, but in erratic bursts, as though the ship itself were breathing. A flicker of movement on the observation feed caught his attention. A human Major Dex stood at the center of Perseverance's command deck, her posture relaxed, her hands resting lightly on the railing before her. No exo-support frame, no neural interface nodes, just raw, unaugmented flesh. Dralethian had seen the training footage. He had watched her soldiers endure simulated plasma burns, vacuum exposure, even limb severance, and still fight, still advance. Bring up the tactical overlay, he ordered. The holodisplay shimmered to life, projecting a wireframe schematic of Perseverance. Vashdor's analysis scrolled alongside it. Structural weak points, energy signatures, potential weapon emplacements, all theoretical, all incomplete. Dralethian's secondary eyes tracked the anomalies. No visible turrets, no missile arrays, but the ship's ventral hull was lined with recessed panels, their edges too precise, their seams too uniform to be mere plating. And the power readings, Commander, Vashdor said quietly, their reactor output doesn't match their energy expenditure. Therese, a discrepancy. A cold realization settled in Dralethian's thorax. They weren't seeing the ship's weapons, they were seeing its sheath. The Molten Claw's reactors pulsed, their heat bleeding into the deck beneath his claws. Standard doctrine demanded he treat this as a reconnaissance mission. Observe, assess, report. But doctrine had not accounted for humans on the feed. Major Dex turned as though sensing his scrutiny, her lips curved. Not in a snarl, not in defiance. Dralethian's grip tightened on the railing. First contact protocols dictated caution. But the galaxy had never met a species that smiled at the unknown. The Molten Claw's command deck hummed with the low, throbbing pulse of its forge core, casting the Dralethian officers in flickering orange light. The air smelled of molten metal and charged plasma, thick with the tension of an unspoken realization. Dralethian's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second. A reflexive response to stress. One he had spent cycles training himself to suppress. The human vessel, resolute, hung in the void before them, its smooth, unbroken hull, a silent mockery of Dralethian design philosophy. Where his own ship was segmented, armored, bristling with obvious weaponry, the human craft was sleek, almost organic in its curvature. And yet, it watched them. Vashdor's claws tapped against the analysis console, the sound like chitin striking glass. The energy signature is still fluctuating, he murmured, his voice a rasp of grinding metal. They're cycling power through systems we can't even identify. Dralethian's mandibles twitched. Standard doctrine demanded he treat this as a reconnaissance mission. Observe, assess, report. But doctrine had been written for enemies who fought with honor, who broadcast their intentions in the flare of weapon ports and the thrum of charging cannons. Humans did neither. On the tactical display, the Resolute remained motionless, a predator feigning sleep. A flicker, a single panel on its ventral side slid open, revealing nothing but darkness. Dralethian's spines stiffened. "Commander," Vashdor said, his voice tight. "They're deploying something." A shape detached from the human ship, small, fast, no larger than a Dralethian scout pod. It moved without thrusters, without the telltale burn of propulsion. It simply glided, as though the void itself carried it forward. Dralethian's claws flexed. "Track it." The object drifted closer, its surface matte black, absorbing the molten claws, scanning pulses like a pit swallowing light. No energy signature, no heat, no radiation. Vashdor's frill flared in alarm. It's not responding to scans. It's as if it's not even there. A cold weight settled in Dralethian's thorax. The humans had sent them a ghost. Then, the object changed. Its surface rippled, unfolding like liquid metal, reshaping itself in mid-flight, segmented limbs extended, a skeletal frame assembling itself with eerie precision. A single red eye flickered to life, and it looked at them. Dralethian's blood ran cold. This was no probe, no drone. It was a messenger. The thing, the construct, hovered before the Molten Claw's viewport, its movements too smooth, too deliberate. Then, with a silent, mechanical grace, it raised one limb and tapped the glass. A sound no Dralethian had ever heard in the void. Vashdor recoiled. What in the molten depths? Dralethian didn't move. The construct tilted its head, as if studying them. Then, with a final, deliberate motion, it pressed its clawed hand against the viewport and pushed. The Molten Claw's hull groaned. Alarms shrieked. The construct wasn't knocking, it was testing their armor. And finding it lacking, the Molten Claw's bridge erupted into chaos. Dralethian's neural tendrils flared crimson as emergency protocols cascaded through the ship's systems. The construct, no, the Predator, had not simply touched the hull, it had measured it. The groan of stressed metal still reverberated through the deck, a sound no Dralethian warship should ever make. Vashdor's claws scraped against the command console, his exoskeletal plates vibrating with barely suppressed panic. Hull integrity compromised at contact point. He hissed. "Minimal damage, but it learned." Dralethian finished. The thing outside was not merely testing their armor. It was learning their weaknesses. A new alert pulsed across the tactical display, an energy spike from the human vessel. The messenger was transmitting. Dralethian's secondary heart thrummed faster. On the human warship Iron Resolve, Major Caroline Dex watched the feed from the drone with clinical detachment. The alien vessel, all jagged angles and molten core aesthetics, had reacted precisely as predicted. Fear. Sergeant Daniel Carter leaned over her shoulder, his scarred knuckles whitening around the edge of the console. "They're not running," he observed. "No," Dex murmured. "They're reassessing." The Dralethians had expected a primitive species. Instead, they had been greeted by a machine that moved like liquid death, a machine that had just knocked back aboard the Molten Claw. Vashdor's analysis was grim. That drone, it's not just a scout. Its structural composition is adaptive. Our scans can't penetrate its outer layer. It's rewriting itself in real time. Dralethian's mandibles tightened. Galactic doctrine dictated that lesser species relied on static, predictable technology. But this was something else. The drone wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of human will, and it was still out there. The bridge crew's tension was a living thing, coiling around them like superheated plasma. Then, a new signal. The drone's single red eye pulsed. A transmission not in Dralethian battle. Not in any known galactic frequency. It was sound. Raw, unfiltered audio. A human voice. Vashdor's frills flared in alarm as the translation matrix struggled to parse the words. The language was archaic, simple, yet the weight behind it was undeniable. "Identify yourselves." Dralethian's claws flexed. Humans did not ask, they demanded, and their machines obeyed. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Dralethian's neural interface flickered with threat assessments, tactical projections, every possible scenario. And yet, none of them accounted for this. A human machine, speaking, not in the sterile, efficient bursts of data that defined galactic communication, but in sound waves, in the raw vibration of air, or in this case, the void-transmitted echo of a voice that should not exist. The drone's single red eye pulsed again, casting jagged reflections across the Dralethian command deck. The light caught on segmented armor plating, on the copper veins of their consoles, on the molten glow of power conduits buried deep within the ship's industrial bulk. It was a light that did not belong. A human light. Vashdor's talons hovered over the translation matrix, frills twitching as the system struggled. Human language was inefficient, redundant, packed with emotional weight where Dralethian communication was precision. And yet, identify yourselves. The words were a command, not a request. Dralethian's mandibles flexed. Galactic protocol dictated response in kind, structured, formal, a display of dominance through unshakable order. But this was not a galactic power. This was human. And humans did not play by the rules. The drone shifted, not with the mechanical certainty of Dralethian constructs, but with something else. Its outer shell rippled, segments sliding like muscle beneath skin, reconfiguring in real time. Adaptive armor, self-repairing systems, it was alive in a way no machine should be. Vashdor's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the thrum of the ship's core. High Commander, it's scanning us. Dralethian did not need the confirmation. He could feel it. The weight of that crimson gaze peeling back layers of their defenses, probing for weakness. Human machines were not tools. They were predators. And this one had just marked them as prey. A new alert flared across the tactical display. The drone's energy signature spiked, not in attack, but in transmission. A signal, pulsing outward, deeper into the void. Calling for reinforcements, Dralethian's claws dug into the command console. Molten alloy hissed beneath the pressure. He had faced empires, broken fleets. But this was something beyond doctrine. Humanity did not send diplomats. They sent hunters, and their hunters never came alone. Section Fe. The crawling dark, the transmission pulsed outward, a single burst of compressed data slicing through the void like a blade through flesh. Dralethian's tactical display flickered as the signal propagated impossibly fast, encrypted in waveforms that made his ship's decryption algorithms choke and stutter. The humans had not just built a drone. They had built a sentinel, and it had just told its masters where to find them. Vashdor's claws trembled over the sensor array. The Dralethian scientist had spent cycles studying the crude warfare of lesser species, dissecting their predictable tactics like a surgeon peeling back muscle from bone. But this was not warfare as the galaxy understood it. This was something older, darker, the kind of predation that did not announce itself with the roar of engines or the flare of disruptor cannons, but with silence, with patience, with hunger. The drone's adaptive armor rippled again, plates shifting like the scales of some great serpent coiling to strike. Its single crimson eye dimmed momentarily, not in power loss, but in recognition. It had seen them. It had learned Dralethian's ship, the Molten Vanguard, was no fragile scout vessel. It was a fortress of forged alloy and plasma, fed engines, a testament to Dralethian supremacy. Yet, as he watched the drone's energy signature stabilize, a cold weight settled in his thorax. The humans had not sent this machine to fight. They had sent it to watch, to study, to understand, and understanding, Dralethian realized with dawning horror, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The first anomaly appeared 17.3 seconds later. A distortion, a flicker in the void, barely perceptible, like heat haze over molten metal. The Vanguard sensors registered it as a minor gravitational fluctuation, a blip dismissed by the automated filters as cosmic background noise. But Dralethian had fought too many battles to trust machines over instinct. "Full scan," he growled, his voice a low rumble of tectonic fury. Now, the ship's systems protested, overloaded by the drone's relentless data assault, but they obeyed. Gravimetric arrays pulsed. Thermal sensors flared. And then, not a ship, not a drone. Something else. Something that flowed between the stars like ink through water. Its outline blurring at the edges, its mass fluctuating in ways that defied physics. It had no engines, no emissions, just presence, a shadow that should not exist. Vashdor's breath hissed through his mandibles, cloaking beyond standard phase. Shift parameters, it's waiting. Dralethian finished. The thing in the dark did not attack. It did not decloak in a storm of weapons fire or broadcast demands of surrender. It simply hung there, watching, as the drone's signal echoed into the abyss. Dralethian's mind raced. Galactic warfare had rules. Protocols. Even the fiercest of the Krallick's hegemony announced their assaults with the thunder of warp cannons. But this was the silence of a predator that had already won. His claws flexed. The Vanguard's weapons were primed, its shields at full strength. Yet for the first time in his long, blood-stained career, Dralethian felt the creeping chill of irrelevance. The humans had not come to fight a battle. They had come to end a war, and the worst part, they hadn't even bothered to bring their ships. The silence was worse than any battle cry. Dralethian's command throne hummed beneath him, its neural interface feeding him the Vanguard's every tremor, every whisper of its reactor core. The ship was ready, had always been ready for war. But war had rules. War had rhythm. This was something else. The human vessel, if it could even be called that, remained motionless, a jagged silhouette against the void. Its hull drank in the light, a black so deep it seemed to peel back the fabric of space itself. No running lights, no engine flare, no telltale thrum of shields cycling, just hunger. Vashdor's talons clicked against his console, the sound too loud in the suffocating quiet. Scanners still can't penetrate. No energy signatures, no life signs. His voice was brittle, the confidence of a scientist crumbling before the unknown. It shouldn't be possible. Dralethian's secondary eyes flicked to the tactical display. The Vanguard's escort fleet had formed a defensive crescent, their molten, orange plasma cannons trained on the intruder. Standard doctrine, textbook positioning, and utterly meaningless because the humans hadn't come with a fleet. They'd come with a knife. Sergeant Daniel Carter exhaled slowly, the sound lost in the pressurized silence of the revenants. Drop pod, his HUD flickered, target locked, systems green, heart rate steady. Beside him, the others waited, motionless. No chatter, no bravado, just the quiet certainty of hunters who knew their prey couldn't run. The Dralethians had scanned them, of course, had seen the pod's outer shell, a crude, angular thing, barely spaceworthy by galactic standards. They hadn't looked deeper, hadn't seen the layered composites beneath, the reactive armor woven with stolen Krallick's phase. Tech hadn't realized it wasn't a pod at all. It was a coffin. Dralethian's crest flared in sudden instinctive alarm. Movement. The shadow twitched. A single panel slid open along its flank. No blast doors, no shimmer of force fields, just a yawning maw blacker than the void around it. Then the pods launched, not with the fiery roar of Dralethian dropships, but with a soundless, seamless detachment, as if the darkness itself had birthed them. They streaked toward the Vanguard, their trajectories too precise, too controlled to be unguided projectiles. Vashdor's voice cracked. They're not slowing down. Dralethian understood a second too late. The humans weren't boarding, they were colliding. The first pod struck the Vanguard's dorsal shield at Facey. The impact didn't register as an explosion. It registered as a blink, a microsecond of distortion as the shield generators overloaded, their orange plasma cores flaring white, hot before detonating inward. The second pod hit bare hull, its reinforced prow shearing through armor plating like paper. Then the third, the fourth, By the time the fifth struck, the vanguard was already bleeding atmosphere, its corridors howling with decompression alarms. Dralethian's claws sank into his throne's armrests. This wasn't warfare. This was butchery, and the humans hadn't even fired a shot. Daniel's boots hit the deck with a muted thud, his armor's dampeners absorbing the impact. Around him, the vanguard's interior was a nightmare of flickering emergency lights and twisted metal, the air thick with the acrid stench of molten circuitry. His squad fanned out without a word. No need for orders. They'd trained for this. Trained to hunt in the dark, a Dralethian guard rounded the corner, his rifle raised, then froze, as Daniel's targeting laser painted a single red dot between his eyes. The alien hesitated. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast. Daniel pulled the trigger. Dralethian stared at the carnage unfolding on his screens. His ship, his proud, impregnable vanguard, was being dismantled from the inside, not by an army, not by some grand, honorable assault. By 12 humans, they moved like ghosts, their black armor swallowing the light, their weapons making no sound as they cut through his crew. No demands, no surrender, just efficiency, cold and absolute. Vashdor turned to him, his mandibles trembling. "We have to." A shadow filled the doorway. Daniel Carter stepped inside, his rifle leveled. Dralethian finally understood. The humans hadn't come to fight. They'd come to teach, and the lesson was written in blood. The Dralethian command deck smelled of molten copper and burning circuits. Dralethian's claws flexed against the armrests of his command throne, the segmented metal groaning under his grip. His secondary heart pounded in sync with the emergency klaxons, a rhythmic, panic drumbeat that matched the flickering orange glow of failing systems. Across the chamber, Vashdor's neural tendrils twitched in erratic spasms, his data slate clattering to the deck as he backed away from the human in the doorway. Daniel Carter did not rush. He stepped forward with the slow, deliberate certainty of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere left to run. His armor was a matte black void against the Dralethians' harsh industrial lighting, the only color the faint crimson glow of his visor's targeting reticule. It settled on Dralethian's thorax, just above the primary heart. The alien commander's mind raced. This wasn't possible. The vanguard was a fortress, its corridors designed to funnel invaders into kill zones, its bulkheads reinforced to withstand plasma bombardment. Yet the humans had slipped through like smoke, disabling entire sections with terrifying precision. No alarms, no distress calls, just silence. Then slaughter behind Daniel. The corridor was littered with Dralethian bodies, not torn apart by explosives or scorched by energy weapons. Each one felled by a single surgical round to the cranial node. Efficient, wasteful was a concept humans seemed to reject even in war. Vashdor's voice was a static whisper. Their neural patterns, they don't falter. The scientist's ocular implants flickered as he accessed the ship's biometric scans. No adrenaline spikes, no fear. Response. Just focus. Dralethian had seen the data before. Human soldiers, when cornered, didn't panic, they adapted. Their brains rewired mid-combat, synapses firing in patterns no Dralethian tactical AI could predict. Where his own warriors relied on the cold logic of battle drills, these creatures fought with something worse. Imagination. A metallic screech echoed through the deck as the Vanguard's primary reactor destabilized. The humans hadn't just boarded. They'd sabotaged. Daniel's helmet tilted slightly. Studying Dralethian, the alien commander had faced enemies before. The crystalline horrors of Zir, the mechanized legions of the Kasari Dominion. But this was different. Humans didn't conquer. They haunted. And now, as the ship systems failed one by one, Dralethian realized the truth. This wasn't a battle. It was an autopsy. Section Fey. We are the plague. The deck plating beneath Dralethian's boots shuddered, not from impact, but from something far worse. Systemic collapse. The Vanguard's reactor groaned like a dying beast, its molten core flickering between surges of orange, red fury, and sickly dimness. Conduits spat arcs of plasma, casting jagged shadows across the command hub's brutalist architecture. The air reeked of scorched metal and ionized panic. Dralethian's secondary heart pounded in sync with the failing stabilizers. His tactical overlay flickered, corrupted by the same viral codes the humans had seeded into the ship's neural network. They hadn't just cut the Vanguard's arteries, they'd taught it to bleed across the chamber. The human soldier Daniel stood motionless. His armor was pitted from close, range plasma burns, his visor a black mirror reflecting the Dralethian's own warped silhouette. No battle stance, no weapon raised, just waiting. Vashdor's voice crackled through the comm, laced with static. Their neural patterns, Captain. They're not even in combat mode. It's like they're hunting. Dralethian's mandibles twitched. Had seen the archival footage from the human wars. Stalingrad's frozen hell, the jungle-choked nightmare of Vietnam, the orbital massacres of the Martian secession. Every time, the same pattern, humans didn't break. They folded, twisting themselves into new grotesque shapes of warfare. A proximity alert screamed. The Vanguard's last functional drone swarm erupted from its launch bays, a storm of segmented kill, constructs gleaming like molten shrapnel. They descended toward Daniel in a wave of razored death. The human didn't flinch. His armor's shoulder mount split open, twin launchers spitting micro-munitions, not explosives, disruptors. The projectiles detonated mid-air, unleashing a storm of fractal algorithms. The drones convulsed, their orange, lit cores stuttering as the code rewrote their directives. One by one, they turned, their weapon arms pivoting toward Dralethian's remaining warriors. Vashdor's claws dug into his console. They're hacking our systems mid-combat, that's impossible. But the humans had never cared for galactic doctrine. Daniel took a single step forward. The deck groaned under his weight. Somewhere in the ship's gut, a secondary explosion rocked the hull. Caroline's work, no doubt. She'd be carving through engineering now, her squad turning the Vanguard's own plasma forges against it. Dralethian's tactical feed fizzed with damage reports, life support, failing, weapons grid, corrupted, escape pods, jammed. A cold realization settled in his thorax. This wasn't a boarding action, it was a demonstration. The humans had let the Dralethians scan their ship, study their tactics, even capture them, all to learn one unshakable truth. You cannot cage what thrives in the dark. Daniel's helmet tilted again. Behind that opaque visor, Dralethian could almost feel the smile. The first drone opened fire. The first drone's plasma burst seared the air, a molten tongue lashing out from the Dralethian security system. It struck Daniel square in the chest, the impact sending him staggering back half a step. The deck plating beneath his boots warped from the residual heat, glowing cherry red where superheated droplets of metal hissed against his armor. Dralethian's secondary eyes pulsed with satisfaction. Finally, proof that this human, for all his posturing, was still flesh. Then Daniel straightened. His armor's outer layer was blackened, the ablative plating cracked and peeling. But beneath it, something gleamed. Not the dull sheen of scorched metal, but a deeper, hungrier refraction, like light bending at the event horizon of a singularity. Vashdor's mandibles twitched. That's not possible. The human took another step forward. The drone fired again. This time, Daniel didn't flinch. The plasma splashed across his chestplate, running off in molten rivulets, and the armor beneath drank it. The energy dispersed in fractal patterns, absorbed into a lattice of metamaterials no Dralethian forge had ever conceived. Dralethian's tactical feed flickered with fresh alerts. The armor wasn't just resisting the plasma, it was feeding, converting the attack's energy into something else. Power reserves, kinetic redistribution, momentum. Daniel's fist closed. The drone didn't even have time to retract its weapon array before he was on it. His gauntlet struck with the precision of a surgical strike, fingers plunging through the drone's armored carapace like a blade through wet clay. Orange, red coolant sprayed in a pressurized geyser as he wrenched its core free, the molten heart of Dralethian engineering sputtering in his grip. For a moment, the chamber was silent save for the drip, drip of liquefied metal hitting the deck. Then Daniel crushed the core in his fist. The sound was obscene, not the clean snap of breaking machinery, but the wet, visceral pop of something organic giving way. Molten alloy oozed between his fingers, hissing as it met the cold air. Dralethian's thorax tightened. This wasn't armor, this was skin. Somewhere in the ship's depths, another explosion rocked the Vanguard. Closer now, the humans weren't just boarding, they were digesting, consuming the ship's systems, repurposing its architecture, turning its own infrastructure against it. Caroline's squad would be in engineering by now, her soldiers grafting human tech onto Dralethian reactors, rewriting the ship's DNA mid-combat. And Daniel, he was the distraction. The warning. Vashdor's claws skittered across his console, pulling up the last intact surveillance feed, the human warship, the one they dead so arrogantly dismissed as primitive, was still out there. Its hull pulsed with the same dark refraction as Daniel's armor, drinking in the Vanguard's desperate counterfire like a starved beast. Dralethian's tactical feed fizzed again, life support, critical weapons grid, assimilated, escape pods still jammed. And then, the final alert, a single line of text, translated from the humans' crude battle. Net Fei, you wanted to study us. Fei now you can. Fei up close. Fei. Daniel's helmet tilted. Behind that visor, something shifted. The second drone opened fire. This time, he didn't even bother to block. The Dralethian Vanguard shuddered, its massive industrial frame groaning under the weight of its own failing systems. The air stank of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the orange, red emergency lights flickering like dying embers in a forge. Vashdor's claws trembled over the console, the once pristine tactical display, now a fractured mess of corrupted data and panicked alerts. He had studied war. He had dissected 100 species combat doctrines, analyzed their weaknesses, their predictable patterns. This was something else. Daniel Carter's armor drank in the drone's fire, the dark plating rippling like liquid shadow before reforming, unharmed. The human didn't flinch, didn't stagger. He simply stood there, letting the energy bolts wash over him like rain. And then he moved. Vashdor's breath caught in his throat. The human wasn't just fast, he was wrong. His movements were too fluid, too precise, as if his body had been rewired by something beyond mere biology. The drone fired again, its plasma bolts searing through the air, only for Daniel to step through them, his armored hand lashing out. The drone shattered, not just disabled, not merely torn apart, annihilated. The remnants of its angular copper-plated chassis crumpled inward, as if crushed by an invisible fist, before detonating in a silent burst of molten shrapnel. Vashdor's mind raced, his scientific instincts screaming at the impossibility of it. The human's armor wasn't just absorbing energy, it was adapting, learning. And then Daniel's helmet turned toward the surveillance feed. Vashdor froze. Behind that visor, something stared back. Not eyes, not a face, just hunger. Dralethian's command throne was slick with his own blood. His carapace ached where shrapnel had torn through, his secondary limbs twitching uselessly at his sides. The bridge was in ruins, half the crew dead, the rest scrambling to reroute power to systems that no longer obeyed their commands. The Vanguard wasn't just losing, it was being consumed. Human tech slithered through the ship's veins like a virus, rewriting its code, repurposing its weapons, its engines, its very bones. The reactors, once roaring furnaces of Dralethian engineering, now pulsed with an eerie, unfamiliar rhythm, their orange-red cores dimming as something darker took hold. And then the comms crackled. Caroline Deck's voice. "Calm," he snarled, forcing himself upright. "You think this is victory, human? You think your tricks will save you when the rest of the fleet arrives?" A pause. Then, "We don't need tricks." The view screen flickered, and then it changed. The human warship, the one they had dismissed as a crude primitive relic, was no longer a ship at all. Its hull had unfolded. Dark tendrils of living metal spiraled outward, weaving between the wreckage of the Dralethian escorts, absorbing their shattered remains like roots drinking from dead soil. At its core, something pulsed, a blackened heart, beating in time with the Vanguard's dying reactors. Dralethians' blood ran cold. This wasn't war. This was metamorphosis. Daniel Carter walked through the halls of the Vanguard, his footsteps silent. The ship's internal defenses had long since stopped firing. The drones lay in pieces. The barricades had melted away, their molten remains curling like dying embers at his feet. He didn't need to fight anymore. The ship was learning. Ahead, the last of the Dralethian soldiers stood their ground, their copper-plated armor gleaming in the failing light. Their weapons trembled in their claws. Daniel didn't raise his own. He simply looked at them, one by one. They stepped aside. Not out of fear, out of understanding. The humans hadn't come to conquer, they had come to teach, and the lesson was almost over. The Dralethian soldiers did not lower their weapons. Their segmented armor plates hissed as cooling systems struggled against the heat radiating from the Vanguard's dying core. The air smelled of molten metal and ozone, thick with the acrid tang of burned circuits and something else. Something organic. Something wrong. Daniel Carter did not move. His armor was cracked, his visor shattered, revealing eyes that should have been exhausted, but instead burned with a quiet, terrifying focus. The Dralethians had seen this look before, in their own warriors, in the final moments before a suicidal charge. But this was different. This was patience. Behind him, the ship groaned. The walls pulsed, veins of blackened alloy threading through the bulkheads like creeping vines. The Vanguard was no longer just a vessel. It was becoming something else, something alive. Dralethian, standing at the forefront of his remaining soldiers, felt his secondary heart stutter. His neural interface, still linked to the ship's dying systems, fed him fragmented data, images of the human boarding pods, of their weapons, of the way they had fought. Not like soldiers, like surgeons, cutting away resistance without hatred, without rage. A low hum vibrated through the deck. The lights flickered, then steadied. Not the harsh orange, red of Dralethian power cores, but a softer, cooler blue. Human systems, rewriting, rebuilding. Vastor, the scientist, staggered forward, his data pad clutched in shaking claws. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the groaning metal. "They didn't come to kill us." Dralethian turned, his mandibles twitching. "Then why?" Vastor's gaze flickered to Daniel, then to the walls, where the blackened veins pulsed in time with the humans breathing. "They think we're sick." Major Caroline Deck stepped through the ruined blast doors, her boots clicking against the warped deck. She carried no weapon, her hands were bare, her expression calm. The Dralethians tensed. She ignored them. Instead, she walked to Daniel's side, her fingers brushing against his ruined armor. A silent check, a confirmation. He nodded once. Then she turned to Dralethian. "You don't understand your own ship," she said. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Dralethian's claws flexed. "It is ours." Caroline shook her head. "No, it's dying, and it's taking you with it." Behind her, the walls shivered. The blackened veins pulsed faster, spreading. The Vanguard's core, once a roaring forge of Dralethian engineering, was now a struggling, wheezing thing. Its energy signatures erratic, poisoned. Vastor's data pad chimed. He looked down, his breath caught. Radiation levels, critical. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was rotting. Daniel exhaled, long and slow. Then he reached up, unsealing his helmet. The Dralethians recoiled as the human atmosphere touched their sensors. Oxygen, rich, thick with the scent of sweat and blood and something else. Something alive. He looked at Dralethian. "We could have blown you apart from orbit," he said, "but that wouldn't have fixed anything." Caroline stepped forward, her hand resting against the wall. The blackened veins reacted, curling toward her touch like seeking roots. "Your reactors are flawed," she said. "The containment protocols, they degrade over time. Poison the crew, the ship, we've seen it before." Dralethian's mind raced. The fatigue, the tremors, the way his warriors had been slowing, weakening, long before the humans boarded. Not battle damage, radiation sickness. Vashdor's voice was hollow. "We thought. It was stress. The war." Caroline's smile was thin, sad. "You were killing yourselves," she said, "and you didn't even know." The vanguard shuddered. Then slowly the lights brightened, the pulsing veins darkened, then stilled. The air grew cleaner, sharper. The humans had done something, fixed something. Dralethian looked at his claws. The faint tremor that had plagued him for months, gone. His soldiers murmured, their weapons lowered, not in surrender. Daniel turned away, walking back the way he had come. "Next time," he said, without looking back, "just ask for help." And as the humans left, the Dralethians stood in silence, watching the walls, no longer dying, but healing. Understanding. The galaxy had called humans monsters. But monsters didn't heal. Additional section. The Vanguard's engines hummed back to life, a sound deeper and steadier than before. No longer the ragged, overworked growl of a dying beast, but the smooth resonance of something repaired. Dralethian stood on the observation deck, watching the human vessel, Resolute, pull away. Its hull gleamed under the distant starlight, unmarked by the scars of war. A ship built not for conquest, but for endurance. Behind him, his crew moved with purpose. No longer sluggish, no longer bleeding from the inside out. The data streams on his console flickered, updated. The humans had left more than just functioning systems in their wake. Schematics, medical protocols, a full diagnostic of the Vanguard's core. Every flaw, every weakness, every leak that had been poisoning them for cycles. And instructions, not demands, not threats. Vashdor stepped beside him, his claws flexing, testing their strength. "They could have left us to die," he said, voice rough. "We would have." Dralethian exhaled, long and slow. The galaxy had rules. The strong survived. The weak perished. Mercy was a luxury no species could afford. Yet the humans had broken them all. Not out of pity, out of choice. On the view screen, the Resolute vanished into the void. Dralethian turned to his crew. "Set course for the home fleet," he ordered. "We have a warning to deliver." And for the first time in his life, it was not a warning of war, but of change.